we're Capra. We're from Lafayette, Louisiana, and you're watching Eclectic Arts.
Hello.
Hi, this is Bedman Burger, and you're watching
Eclectic Arts.
Aloha, I'm Jake Shimabukuro, and you're watching Eclectic Arts Media with my good friend Mark.
Let me hold this the right way. We're exiting the good light, so you guys get the awful truth. No, I'm kidding.
Then you got people that are hard workers, and then you have, hey!
He was super excited about it. He's like, we're gonna cut your eye. I was like, oh, okay. Sure.
I mean, I thought it was really good. It's just half the time I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, why did you do that? Why are you making that face?
As always, Mark, it's always an honor to hang out with you and spend this evening with you. And visit with you for dang sure. I really appreciate it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Hey man, that was a great show. You're a tough act to follow.
Glad I could help. I was just in the right place at the right time.
I'm glad you were. You kind of saved us tonight.
The stars must have aligned. Listen, if you ever need a reliable support act, you know, one that's got your back, no drama, I'd be down.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Mark Sugiyama from Eclectic Arts Media, based here in Seattle, Washington. And thank you so much for joining me on this Saturday, the 28th of January, 2023. We're almost through January, which is crazy to me. And as always, I have a few housekeeping details to go through. I want to thank Mike Evans from last week for joining me. And if you're joining me right now, it's probably why you're here, because we're ready to do part two. And I also want to thank Gabe Gilbo from Yellowstone for also joining me last week. It was wonderful hearing his behind the scenes stories and what it took for him to become the craft services person on that show, and then also becoming a character on the show as well. And so coming up, I do have another live stream scheduled right now, which is this Tuesday, the 31st of January at 6 p.m. Pacific. I have Julia Poorman scheduled to join me. She is a wonderful singer-songwriter. Just put out a new single, I want to say it was this past week, called Runaway Ship. So I'm looking forward to talking to Julia about her music and everything else she has going on. And I also have, I don't have the day and the time yet, but I do have 3 guests that are committed to doing a fun table / round table, one with a specific emphasis on females in film. And so I'm so happy that all 3 are ready to do this. They want to do it, want to meet each other and come on and talk about their experiences as actors, screenwriters, producers, and all that type of thing as females in the film industry. And so hopefully that'll be sometime in February. And if you'd like to know more about what I have going on, please follow me as Eclectic Arts Media, one word, on Instagram. That's where I post everything first. And then some of that information migrates over to other social media platforms. If this is your first time joining me on my YouTube channel, please do me a huge favor and hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell. I greatly appreciate that. I saw some people from last week have kind of increased my numbers. So every sub helps, as anyone who's on YouTube understands and knows. And if you're on the Twitch side of things, I see I got some followers there. So I did follow people back. I'm so bad about doing that, but please follow me on Twitch. That's where I started all of this virtual work with the wonderful band Alice from Los Angeles. And please know that we have a little bit more time today. Unfortunately, last week I had to stop it what I consider early. I like to let things kind of naturally flow where they go. And so we're back today, and we have a little bit more time than we did last week. And so if you have comments, please join the YouTube channel or the Twitch channel and put your comments and questions in the chat, and I will incorporate those as I can. And if you have anything for me, I know there was a gentleman, I think it was a gentleman last week who had a question about me, and I didn't want to take up too much time talking about myself. I'm okay with it today. That sounds terrible, but I'm okay with it. So it's going to be a little bit more free form and loose, especially now that my guest and I have a chance to have already met and talked. And so again, if you have something that you want to know about me or something with Alice or that whole virtual tour from 2 years ago, or just in general, I'm happy to talk about that. So, all right. Did I forget anything? I don't think I did. Okay. My guest today first joined me 1 week ago to discuss his animated series XRL7 and his band Mixie One. He has graciously set aside time today to continue our conversation. please welcome back to the Eclectic Arts Media virtual studio, Mr. Mike Evans.
Yo, Mark, long time no speak. How you doing?
I'm doing really well, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great. Saturday, chilling out, chatting with cool people. It's all good.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to come back and continue where we left off. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, man, I really enjoyed that chat last night, and I believe the viewers did as well, of the people I've spoken to. And I'm very keen to learn a bit more about your relationship with one of the bands which you've got 2 photos of behind you with Alice, the band that we've got in common.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. Sometimes I forget. I have to look here to see like what do I have back here. And as we were talking pre-show and a little bit last time, and anyone that's in the chat, thank you so much for joining us. And again, I can see the people said they're ready for round 2. Anytime the conversation, if there's something you want to know specifically or just in general, I know I have a question for you though to kind of start things off, which is about that band. You mentioned that you first got to know me through their tour, the virtual tour, the Inside Out virtual tour with Alice. It's kind of tattooed in my brain. I had to say it 59 times. And did you watch just a couple of them as they happened? Did you see them after the fact, after they're already online, or just came to them a year ago? Or
during the time, I was normally, because in the UK, I was probably asleep at the time. So most of them I saw on the replay after the fact and watched the long form thing, usually while I was at work, or no, that's during the pandemic, wasn't it? So I think still had a little bit of Office and then before that. So I watched a little bit, and mostly it was just chilling out while I was animating and doing whatever I need to do. So I did enjoy them. But I didn't live mostly.
Okay. All right. That's true with the time difference. I keep forgetting that sometimes they had a couple, not a lot. I think it's maybe 2 shows that were international shows where we had guests from, oh gosh, and I forget what the name of that country, but it was a place they had visited back in 2012. I think it's Mankind Lost Obsolete. And so like I remember I had to do my interview like at 11 in the morning or something, my time, and it was just kind of like, okay. And then they had like 5 different bands from all, and some of them were pre-records that they had gotten, but some of the other ones were actually live. So it's like trying to juggle that whole thing. But
yeah, that was a big undertaking. How much did you research the bands before the night? Because I guess it seems like it was quite in the moment what was going on.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Truth be told, when it comes to dark wave and electro and things of that nature, I'm not the biggest connoisseur of that music. So a lot of the bands and DJs that they had on, I didn't know who they were. So I only knew the guests that I had on. Even then, sometimes it was something that just kind of came across my purview. So I'm like, hey, would you be interested in coming on and doing this 30-minute live stream interview thing? But with them, it was interesting because they'd have people that they already knew from many other times and had met in person and had come on. And so if they had to come on a couple times, then I would start looking at to kind of see what's going on with them. And so I'm kind of indirectly connected to them now, which is really awesome. I mean, it's an awesome way to go. I got interested in watching YouTube. Okay. But for me, at least, with if you're asking about the bands and DJs they had, I didn't really do much of anything. I know they did all that heavy lifting, if you want to call it that. And they just kind of knew. One thing I think they kind of figured out after the fact, and I didn't plan, I was just commenting on it. The first leg of it, our start times were all over the place. So it might have been 7 p.m. Pacific. It could have been 4 p.m. It could have been later. I don't think it was later. It's always between 4 or 5, 6 or 7 p.m. And I thought they were doing that because they wanted to accommodate people that are on the East Coast, that they knew like a band that's over there. So it's like, hey, we can't start too late because it's 10 o'clock for them. And so any given day, for me, it was hard because I couldn't count it. Okay, it's 7 o'clock, it's 7 o'clock. No, it's like, I got to make sure I'm looking at what time I'm supposed to be ready. And I just made a comment about, they're so great about trying to accommodate other guests that they'll start, anytime that they can't accommodate these guests. And from what I kind of understand is that they didn't think about just trying to make it uniform, make it basically easier on them. Just pick a time and start like that. So then the next ones, that's what they were doing. It's just like, let's just make it 7 p.m., and we'll just kind of make people kind of work around that time if we can. And then I used to be, and you know how this goes. Scott, the guitarist, used to have me come on So if we started at 7 p.m., I would be tech checking at 6:30 p.m. with my guest. And because he had the other bands and DJs to kind of do the same tech check with. So I would be sitting there for 30 minutes with my guest before we went live. And at the time, and Tosh knows this, when we were setting all this stuff up, I thought, gosh, 30 minutes to talk to somebody that I barely know, that's a long time. Because in person, you get like 10 minutes, if you're on a tour or whatever, you don't get a lot of time to do these in-person ones. So that's what I was used to in my head. And so I'm like, 30 minutes, what am I going to ask somebody for 30 minutes? So I still have that message. I remember asking her, is it okay if I do like 15 minutes with one guest and 15 minutes with another guest? And she's like, Mark, you have 30 minutes. You can do whatever you want. We'll work it out with Scott. So I'm so glad that I didn't do that, because, and you can, anyone who's watching this, all of those interviews that I did on that Alice tour are on my YouTube channel. They're on playlists broken down by the legs of the tour. I would get to the end of my 30 minutes, man, I wish I had more time to talk with you, but now we have to wrap things up. And it happened all the time. And I said, God, I'm just a chatterbox. So if I had done a 15-minute one, I would have gotten like hardly anything out during that time. But it's been a really interesting community of meeting not only the bands and the DJs, but a lot of their fans.
Yeah.
And just as you know, I'm sure with your fans that are in the chat now and on your Discord and everything else, it's such a nice community when you have these people that they really get to know you. I mean, they get to know you well. And I'm a pretty open book, so a lot of times I will talk about things during these live streams that I kind of forget that I mentioned. So someone can mention it to me later. It's like, Mark, when you're doing that one show, I'm like, when did I talk about that? It's like, oh, okay, yeah, duh.
Yeah, how do you know that?
Yeah, it's just like, that's a little creepy to me.
Yeah, it's certainly true. You do get to know. I think you attract attracts like in it with music. You attract people that have, a similar mindset a lot of the time. Devin Townsend famously said that. I love a bit of Devi. Still trying to get him on the show. But you definitely attract some very creative people when you put something out that's creative and genuine, I feel. And some really awesome people. And it's really nice to connect with them. And it's this mutual thing going on. So I definitely can relate and respect that.
Yeah, no, and you said that very well. And I think last week I mentioned that when I met Alice and their people, I felt like I found my tribe.
Yeah.
And and you're right. It's like, like talking with you, I can tell we have things in common. There's going to be a certain level of respect that you have with people, and also just that mentality. And for a lot of the fans that were in the chat, I definitely mentioned and learned, in real life, maybe they're a little bit more introverted, a little bit more quiet. So this platform they love because they can just kind of be at home and be on the computer. But if they had to talk to me like this in person, it'd be like they wouldn't say too much because they're just not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And I was extremely introverted through high school, so I can relate to it. So I'm not this extroverted, forward type of person.
So I'm interested in that because I think we're quite similar. We've got a little bit of a chilled, introverted sort of vibe. How did you get into this very social role of speaking to all these different musicians?
That's another great question. So if we go back to that, I can tell you. So Eclectic Arts started in 2011. I don't have those here. So it was a fanzine, a hard copy fanzine, and the only reason that I started that was that there was a black metal band from the Czech Republic called Maniac Butcher, who I was a fan of, and they had stopped the scene like 10 years prior. They said, "Oh, we're tired of the scene. It's becoming a bunch of whatever," and they came back with a new album. I didn't even know that. I was like, "Where'd this come from?" So I used to communicate with the singer via email, and we were going back and forth, and he was kind of catching me up what was been going on the past 10 years and all that. And I kept thinking, well, I bet you other fans would like to read this. So like, well, what do I do? And at that time, I'm like, well, I can maybe try to make a little zine. Like I used to buy zines. I get the little, Xerox ones and the ones that are a little bit more semi-professional. And I don't have that kind of background. I mean, I don't have it at all for layout, graphic design. I'm not a journalist, and that kind of thing. So it really became like, but I've been very much a music nut most of my life, including in the underground, especially in the metal scene. So it's like, well, let me just kind of reach out to some of these labels and some of the bands I know, see would they want to do just an email interview, and all of them said yes. And so I'm like, oh, now I actually need to do something about this. So I just started assembling these interviews and then trying to figure out where I'm going to get this printed and how to do a layout and all these other kind of things. And I was so happy when the first one was getting ready. Where I can interject is that in person, I want to say this was in September of 2010, I had seen a wonderful singer-songwriter named Vienna Teng, and she's actually coming back and doing music again, thankfully. So my mindset's always been, well, if I could talk to anybody, who do I want to talk to? And I was like, well, it'd be great to talk to Vienna. She seems so smart and so caring and giving with her music. And I'm like, so I tried to do the whole internet search to figure out who are her people, how I get a hold of her. Didn't hear anything for months. So I just gave up. I just kept moving on to the other things that I was working on. And then early 2011, her publicist got a hold of me. Mark, I'm so sorry. We've been getting your emails, and Vienna does want to do the interview if you have time. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And she said, yeah, she wants to do a phone interview with you. At that time, I'd never done one. So I'm like, I don't even know how you record this stuff. Again, this is 2011. So I had to do some research about getting a digital recorder and an earpiece and all this other kind of stuff. And we were talking about this at the end when we went offline last week. I was so nervous for that first phone interview with her. I mean, oh my goodness, it was just ridiculous how much I was sweating. And I was on the phone. I wasn't even doing this where I'm like seeing her and looking at her and that kind of thing. And I've told this story before. I overthink things. I'm definitely a planner. I like to plan ahead as much as possible to make sure things are as successful as possible. And that in that case, it actually worked out for me because that morning I was checking stuff on my computer to make sure that something didn't get rescheduled. I was double checking my connections with my audio stuff, and I had all my questions printed out back then because I'm like, if I have a brain fart, just read the question mark. That's all you have to do. And turns out she was over in Detroit, and so I had the time zone wrong. I was actually thinking she was going to come on, ring my phone like at 9 my time. Turns out she was going to be calling me at 8. And because I was actually ready early, being Mr. Overthinker, when my phone rang and it's some number I don't recognize right at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, it's got to be her. And I'm like, why is she calling an hour early? That's when she was telling me about, oh, I'm in Detroit, and they told me this ahead of time. I just didn't, do the math right. So, long story short, I almost would have missed this a wonderful interview and opportunity to talk with her had I gotten ready at 9. She would have been done. So planning ahead paid off in my case.
Yeah, nicely done.
Yeah, super early. But I only did 3 issues of the zine, and then that moved over to really I was still doing some interviews and doing some phone interviews. The in-person stuff, I did some audio interviews in person with some film people, not a lot, but a few film people. And then 2015 was the first video interview. That was with Doyle from the Misfits. And there's another, I overthought that one. I planned way ahead. I had my friend with me. We were down in Seattle like 5 hours ahead of time. And I just didn't understand how this whole world works when you're on tour. And the publicist, not the publicist, the tour manager, Robin, had texted me and said, Mark, let's do it like at 9 o'clock before he goes on and does his set. And I'm like, 9 o'clock? I thought it was going to be more like at 5 or something because the band was already there and all this kind of stuff. And kind of forgot he needs to do all his makeup on his face and kind of be ready to go. And so by the time I got on that tour bus, the whole band was on there. Robin was on there. Some fan from some other country that had kind of like pleaded to like meet Doyle was also on the bus, just kind of standing awkwardly in the corner. And so I come on there with my assistant, and all these eyes are just staring at me. It was kind of uncomfortable, to be honest. And I'm already
sort of, who is this sort of way?
Yeah, it was. I just thought it was really strange that, like, don't they have anything else to do, or some of them be in the club or something, but they're all just there. And so my assistant sat across from me. I'm sitting right next to Doyle, and then off we go for that interview. And luckily for me, I had overplanned again. And so I watched all the interviews prior, and I don't know if you're familiar with his style of interviews, but he's very introverted. He doesn't like to talk to people too much. So people think he's rude. He's actually not rude at all. He doesn't really like to do these things. So many of them, the interviews are really awkward. I mean, they are like painfully awkward. If you go look on YouTube later and see things from 2015 when he was doing interviews on his tour bus, and they might be like really short, like 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes. I saw one where the girl was like reading questions from a piece of paper and he'd answer it like in one-word sentences.
Yes, no.
Yeah, and then she just go right back to the next question. I'm like, I felt bad for everybody. I felt bad for the interviewer, but I felt bad for him. So my goal in my head was like, if I can get him past, I think it was like 20 minutes or something, that would be the longest one with just him talking, not with the singer or anybody else in the band in the interview. And I think we went like 23 minutes or something like that. So he definitely he warmed up to me and got loose, and then I got loose as well. From that point on, it was really starting to do all these interviews in person. So when the pandemic hit, luckily I already had some interview skills going when Alice brought me that wonderful opportunity to do these virtual ones. But because I don't think they would have, even if I had done the one in 2017 with them like I did, there'd be no reason for them to, like, if I had just done an email one with them, I don't think Tasha would have reached out to me and said, hey, you want to come on and do this virtual stuff? I don't think it would have the same resonance with her. But I could be wrong, but I think it's just because of the in-person contact that we had in 2017. So
yeah, nicely done stepping out your comfort zone to do this stuff, because I know as an introvert it's challenging but rewarding.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I'm kind of curious about, so for yourself, do you consider yourself introverted?
Very much so. Very much. I wasn't even planning to start an XRL7. I wasn't planning to even have my face, that much of a prominent thing. I thought, I recognized that to get a bit of support, maybe on Patreon and other places, a lot of places, I noticed a lot of individuals seem to resonate more than, a group or collective, if you know what I mean, in terms of Patreon and stuff. So before anything went live, I was thinking I'm going to need to put myself out some way so people know this isn't just a faceless studio, like a anonymous group of people. It's one dude putting hours and hours into this. So that's why I did the behind the scenes series, the backstage series. But I'll tell you what, dude, but going into that, I was like, who's going to want to listen to me speak? And for years I've had insecurities about my voice being higher than most men around me when I was growing up, having like a high sort of voice. So I was like, I really wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, but I recognized that I had to do it. And I saw in getting into grips with voice acting, I remember this one video that I never forgot, which has affected my public speaking to this day, is that there was someone talking about using the full range of your voice. Because when you're normally speaking to someone in general, if you're like me, you're like, you're right, mate. You're right, Mark. How you doing? Yep. But with voice acting, it's something I try to do is use more of the range of my voice, go higher and lower and quiet, and just a bit more emotion to it, and it makes it more engaging to listen to. And I also, going off on a tangent, saw a YouTube video of this. There was this guy that was talking about anime, this Irish dude, and I remember his voice kind of bugged me, but he spoke. He had a lot of something about him was very engaging, so I couldn't look away from the stuff he was talking about. And he had a lot of followers. I noticed that he spoke about everything as if it was the most dramatic thing ever, like something, and then that changed everything, the most trivial thing. So I started implementing that into my voiceover a little bit to the backstage stuff, and I got some really lovely feedback from people about, my talking, my normal non-voice acting talking, and that really boosted my confidence. And similarly with going on live streams like this, Mark, I wouldn't have imagined that, a few years ago. In fact, last year was the first time ever to go on live streams. There's this lovely channel called Comics Division who talk about media and have a bit of commentary and stuff. And I was invited on that, and I remember my first reaction to that, like emotionally, was no. It's like, no, jeez, no. But I felt like, this is an opportunity. I need to do this. Like, this is something I've just got to push through. And in the end, it was at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. my time, the first one. I've been on a few now. And from that, I'm so glad I did it, because I've met some amazing people, had some really great experiences, opened up to a new network of people and made some new friends. And it's always worth doing. Getting through that introverted voice that says hide under some coats or something.
I can totally relate to that, and I see Rihanna saying that she's definitely noticed the difference between your first interview to now, and it's such a huge positive difference. So you're all good.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's when I was and hi Alex, good to see you. Alex is
Hey.
met Alex through the Alice virtual tour based down in Las Vegas, and I laugh about it now, but it probably wasn't funny at the time. When I was getting ready for my preparation for doing the Alice virtual tour, when this is all new to me, just kind of like what you're speaking about, when people reached out to you about doing an interview, you're like, no, that's the last thing I want to do with this live stream thing and people having to see and hear my voice. I was watching late night hosts trying to understand, so how do they engage the audience? What do they do? What do they say? What kind of makes me want to watch like a David Letterman or something back in the day? And so I was trying to incorporate that, which was for me was completely the wrong thing to do because that's not my personality. And so the first I don't know, 3, maybe even 4 of those interviews I did on the Alice tour, I'm kind of like being this kind of host kind of thing, and kind of almost like a game host, and I'm saying things I normally wouldn't say, and it just seems so disingenuous when I watched it back, and it wasn't giving me the right reaction from the guests either. I think they're kind of like, what's up with this guy? This doesn't seem right. And thankfully, I'm such a person, I think you're probably the same way. I'm always trying to do better with my artistic work, so I'm never satisfied with it. I think it's the curse of every artist. And so I kept looking back at anything I would do when I was there and try to say, what can I do better? I'd ask other people that watched this. I'd do a FaceTime with my friends, like, I know you watched it live, so how did it come across? And like, yeah, you need to kind of fix some things that, it didn't seem like you. Where is you in this, Mark? And it was really great feedback. So I kind of realized just kind of be how I am. I'm more of a laid back kind of person. I tend to ramble, and it's like, is that what people want? And it turns out it kind of, in my case, it was. It's just because then they get to feel like they know the person instead of trying to be this thing that I'm putting out there, which isn't me at all. So no, that whole thing of this whole concept of doing virtual interviews, and now I'm sure you're much more comfortable with what you do and you enjoy it. And like you said, you have a new network of friends and contacts and everything. I'm in the same exact boat. I mean, the fact that I'm talking with you right now from the UK and I'm in Seattle because of Alice and because of that tour, it never would have happened had I not done it. Yeah. So I wouldn't have been knowing what is this RX, what is this thing, and Mixie, what? Yeah, and it's interesting when I get a chance to tell people in person, like at my Muggle job during the day, that when I find out I do the media outlet, they're like, oh, so they want to hear more about it. And when I tell them all these things, they're kind of like, well, you must know a lot of interesting people. I'm like, I don't know, I just don't really think of it that way. So no, I know people. And yeah, they're in different parts of the world, literally. I mean, they're actually in different parts of the world. And one of the best things, and maybe this has happened to you, is when I've done virtual interviews. And so I've never actually met that person in person. And then I finally get a chance to do that. So this past summer that happened with a couple of the guests. One was someone that I had on who was an emergency room physician from France. And she was here in Seattle. So I was like, hey, we actually got to be in the same space. and
that's awesome.
Yeah, have dinner and that kind of thing. And it's so interesting just to kind of have that in-person exchange. And then one of the bands that's in my video intro, Capra, when they're sitting, there's 4 of them. They're from Louisiana, and they came here. So obviously we did the interview outside and all that. But I had done interviews with the singer and the guitar player virtually. So that was the first time we actually met in person. And I remember I got into the club, and my contact was the guitarist, Tyler. So he knew that I was there and all that kind of thing. And he told the band and the singer, I was just kind of wandering around through the club. There wasn't a lot of people in there at that time. I just heard this Mark, and I'm turning around, and there's the singer, and she comes over, and the first thing she says to me, I'm sorry if I stink. I hadn't showered or whatever. And she was giving me a hug, and
now you stink.
Yeah, exactly. And I told her, I've been going to shows forever, so I totally get it. You're in the same clothes, and maybe you don't have the money to be in a motel, so just using baby wipes and doing the best you can.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. But it was awesome to go from virtual to in person with some of these folks, and I'll never forget that. So
that's so cool. Yeah, I've not experienced that myself in the series yet. Still time, because to be honest, a lot of the people in the show are international. They're not based in the UK. There's a couple, but a lot of them are American. Oddly enough, I'm not sure why that is. I don't know. I guess it's a love of American music or something. But yeah, and I must say that you mentioned the intro to the live stream. I thought I was watching it today, and like really paying attention to it, and I thought it was a very touching intro. It just kind of shows how many lives you've touched and encountered in doing what you love to do.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I do watch it every time I do a live stream. So I'm not like sitting here like doing other things and whatever, because it does kind of remind me too of like how special it's been and how grateful I am for the opportunities that I've been afforded. Anytime and even when I'm making a new one, I try to do like maybe once a month, once every 2 months. It's like, yeah, look at the people that you had a chance to talk to virtually, in person, the events that I've gotten a chance to do. So it's like, and it's so easy to kind of get caught up on like, I feel like I'm kind of stagnating, or like I'm not getting where I want to go. It's not getting bigger or whatever. And then I see those kind of things that kind of reminds me, like, no, it's just like, I think I kind of touched on this last week. Just remember how many great things you have had a chance to do and how many wonderful people you do now know. And if Mike comes from England over to Seattle for some reason that you come here, I know you now. We could actually find a way to actually meet in person and be awkward together or whatever,
Yeah.
It's wonderful. And yeah, there's definitely bands from Europe, and there's one from South Africa that's finally coming to the US and doing some shows. I don't know if they're coming to Seattle, but if they do, we've spent like hours doing live streams. So it's kind of like we already know each other. So I can't wait to hopefully get a chance to have them come to Seattle and meet. And yeah, so this whole thing has been such a lifeline for me during the pandemic. It's been such a wonderful tool to, like you said earlier, to expand what I do and the people and the fans and people that are watching this right now. And it's just been great to have this through. And now that I get a chance to still do it, because I kept thinking about what it's going to be like once we're out of the pandemic. Is this going to kind of go away for me? And I really love doing this. So I'm like, why would it? It's just going to be another tool in the toolbox. And see, Alex saying it's an amazing journey that is best when you don't rush. Yeah, no, that's true, Alex. You just kind of take it in. And I'm terrible about trying to smell the roses. I'm always looking at the next thing. I'm always trying to grind, and keep trying to get bigger and better and all that kind of thing. And I've been trying to learn more about just slowing down, really appreciating what's been done, and then move on to the next thing instead of just like, just going, what's next.
That's the problem with like, the internet culture, the content creator age, isn't it? It's always like, what's next. And it's good to take a minute. I'm guilty of this myself a lot. It's you're just thinking, what can I do next? What have I got to do? And it's good to just take a moment to sit back, reflect, maybe even listen to your own work and watch your own work and be like, oh yeah, there's lots of amazing people in this journey so far. And just reflecting on all the things you've accomplished so far. But definitely it's hard to get out of that headspace sometimes. What's next?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about the age that we're in. And I think I've said this before, that if I wasn't doing eclectic arts and all that, I wouldn't be on social media. I would just not be a part of it. Because of what I do, it's like a part of the deal. It's like, I know I need to be putting stuff out there and letting people know, like when I have an interview, it's kind of important to let people know. Yeah, there's definitely times I think, well, maybe I should just kind of take a break. But then my idea of a break is like 3 days. It's like, maybe I should be more like 3 weeks or, like a month or something. But then so it's like, well, no, I work so hard. And plus I enjoy it. I mean, I really do enjoy doing the things that I do. It's some of the kind of things around it. And when it comes to like, guests that don't show up, publicists that don't get back to you. And you talked about this when you're trying to work out, getting people to do work for your animated series. And sometimes you want to be respectful of them, just give them their time. But then after a while, it's kind of like, so are you ever going to do this? Or...
Yes. Oh God, yes.
Yeah. So do you ever get to a point where you're just like, I need to kind of just unplug from X-RL7 and Mixie One and all this kind of world for a bit?
To be honest, like I actually, if I have too long away from it, I get a bit antsy. I get a little bit like, oh God, I need to do something. I get a little bit, I don't know. It's because there is, as well as that, there is a bit of a, it's good to take some time away, make no mistake, for mental health, but also physical health if you're typing all the time or drawing all the time. But for me, if I'm away from creativity too long, you know, I go slightly crazy because it's like I just need to do it for some reason. So for me, like, you know, a week away, that's okay. I can do it. But that's why holidays are a bit hard for me, because like it's like, okay, I could be animating now. I could be doing something. I guess it's because, you know, we've got the day jobs, we've got this and that. And I think as you get a bit older as well, you get a bit more existential and you think, okay, I really need to get stuff done, you know, before anything else happens in my life, or, you know, whatever, you know what I'm saying? So there's a thing in the back of my mind always that it's like, I could be working now. I could be doing something. I could be doing something. So it's good to take some time away, but I can't get away for too long, quite honestly.
Okay. You know, well, that makes me feel better.
Justified.
Yeah. Because again, if I'm saying things to people at work about what I have coming up for any given week, and they're like, God, Mark, that's a lot of stuff that you do. And on one hand, I think it's cool, but at the same time, they're kind of like, how do you find the time and the energy to do it? And I'm like, well, it's what I love doing, though. So, you know, actually the thing to try to find the energy to do is actually the day job. That's actually the one that you have to find the get up and go for. Doing this is like, no, I love doing this kind of thing. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I've had, whenever time I've actually been unplugged for a bit, and if I'm on not so much vacation, but just like not just somewhere, there's always that little nagging thing of like, you know, I could be doing something with this time right now instead of being wherever I'm at or talking to whoever I'm talking to.
Exactly right. Yeah, definitely.
But I see there's, let me put this on the screen. Question for Mike here. There we go.
Hi, Raz. That sounds like a loaded question coming from someone from the Discord server. It's anything is possible. Oh, I don't see why not. There's always a possibility for things to happen. It's always finding the right characters, because there's a finite amount of characters in an episode. But, you know, I don't see why things can't happen in the future at some point.
Well, so there you go. That's not a no. And
I was thinking, oh, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was thinking earlier, because I caught another interview you did before a while ago, and you sort of briefly touched upon it earlier that, you know, you like a bit of metal. You're sort of heavy metal, death metal dude. And I was quite surprised by that. And because a lot of times, you know, people that are into really heavy stuff, I'm surprised how chill people are, because you're a very chilled guy. But it reminded me of, I mean, I guess I am too. And I love screamy, growly stuff as well. But it reminded me of this time I was in this shop in London, and I can't remember the chain, but it's called Cyber something. And it's like this alternative music shop, and they got thumping music and like chains and all sorts of stuff. And I went there and they were playing this song that I thought was really cool. It was an industrial song. And I saw this guy and he looked so hardcore. He was like wearing all the gothic gear and like chains and everything like that and spikes. And he was an employee of the shop, oddly enough. And he was like mouthing along. And I said, excuse me, what's this song? It's really cool. And in the poshest, most softest voice you've ever heard, he was like, oh, that's Infected Mushroom. And I was just shocked like how soft he was. And it was like, oh yeah, I guess, you know, I don't know. It's just like, because the stereotype is heavy metal and stuff is like, you know, really hardcore people, but it's just not the case.
Yeah, no, I can totally relate to that when you're talking about that story. I think about like the Cannibal Corpse, long-time death metal band originally from New York and based in Florida. And I've met those guys several times. And so if you only know them from their music and their videos, you're thinking, oh my God, I don't even think I want to meet those people. I mean, they sound crazy, especially Corpse Grinder, the vocalist. And he's that intimidating dude and just, you know, doing the windmills with his head, all that kind of thing. You'd be like, oh my gosh. And they could not be anymore like just regular people that you would just meet on the street. I mean, they're so unassuming. Yeah. And if you saw them and you're, I don't know, eating at a restaurant or something and just talking to them about music or whatever, you'd have no idea that maybe that's the level of music or level of metal that they do. And luckily, I'd say, and including a lot of the fans, mean, there's some exceptions, of course, but most of them, yeah, are pretty just regular kind of people. And yeah, some of them are even like softer than you thought they were going to be. And I think the one area of some people that I've met genre wise would be like some of the black metal folks. And they're really, not all of them, but there's been a few of them that are like, they're just kind of odd. I don't know any other way to put it. They're not bad people. They're just kind of so in their head that maybe that's why the music comes out the way it does. And so if you try to talk to them, they're just they're not present with you. And I kind of definitely notice that about just people in general, when they're just like not there when you're trying to talk to them.
Think about the next church to burn down, probably.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And granted, again, some of the other ones in the black metal world have been just great regular people who want to talk shop about 80s metal bands and all that kind of stuff. But some of the other ones, yeah, they're a little peculiar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see that. Yeah, and I think people that aren't into metal definitely assume that metalheads are just these crazy, people that are just going to be people you don't want to associate with. And then once you get a chance to talk to them, it's that whole, don't judge a book by its cover. It's like, oh no, they're like really cool. And Cancer Slug's one of my favorite bands from Alabama, who are definitely more punk based, with Alex Storr. And Alex is actually the singer of Doyle's solo band. So that's how
awesome.
Yeah, and I know Alex pretty well, and they were just here last summer. But if you listen just strictly to their music, you'd be like, man, this dude, I mean, the things he sings about is not for everybody. And it's supposed to be tongue-in-cheek humor, but some people don't find it funny. I do. So I just laugh about it. But as someone who's a little bit more serious would be like, I can't believe he's writing songs about that. Oh my God, be up in arms about it. And it's just like, no. And if you ever met the guy, he'd give his shirt off his back to you. And I've never met somebody so just, you talk about being like an open book. That dude, he'll talk to you about anything that's happened in his life. He's very open about, like, I think he was living on his own since he was 14. So he's had a very lived in life, just trying to survive basically. And I think that's what comes out in his music. That's why there really isn't anything else like his band. And so me being this media person or whatever, some of these bands, I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not the best friend. I can't get on my phone and text them, but they know me if they see me. And so like if there's somebody else who's a fan who knows me from watching these live streams, and that actually happened this summer, they're like, hey, Mark. And I'm like, I don't know who you are. I feel really bad about this.
That's pretty cool. You're a celebrity.
It's weird. I'll be honest with you. Anytime locally somebody says my name or saw some of my photographs from a concert from something else I'd done, and they, hey man, aren't you Eclectic Arts or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, that's me. I try to be nice about it, just give everyone that respect. But there were some fans at the Cancer Slug show that knew me, so I was talking to them and hanging out, and they turned out to be pretty cool. And then the band showed up, and so they're all DIY. So that band, they're literally dragging themselves in a 15-passenger van, just the three of them. And so I went up to Alex and said, hey man, you guys need some help, loading out into the club. And he said, yeah man, if you have some people. So I just waved at those fans. It's like, hey, come over here. And they're kind of like, us? Like, yeah man, let's grab that drum kit and grab those merch boxes and grab that stuff and let's help get in there. And they thought that was like the coolest fucking thing in the world, that they're actually getting to help the band. And I was like, yeah, they're just regular people, man. And they just drove 300 miles to get here. So they're fucking tired.
Yeah.
So it's weird, the kind of things you have in your head of what someone's like. And then when you get the chance to actually be in their world, especially if you only know them from this, it's like, oh man, we're all just trying to do what we want to do and live our dreams and have a living and that kind of thing. It doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah, definitely.
All in the same boat.
Yeah. Alice is like super DIY, aren't they? And I'm curious to ask, because I recall you posting at one point about that particular picture that was actually behind you with Sasha, where it had a bit of a moment. It was a bit of a human interaction there.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
I was curious to hear the story about that. If you're comfortable telling it, of course.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was from the Mechanismus Festival last July 1st here in Seattle. So that's a big 4-day festival with industrial, electro, all types of different bands over those 4 days. And so that was going to be our big in-person reunion of Alice and myself after having done the whole virtual tour for 59 shows. We hadn't seen each other since 2017 in person, so it's been 5 years. And I had a couple of friends who actually were guests that I had that I interviewed, and then Alice actually had them do a music set during another leg of the tour, come to the show because they wanted to meet them and see them live and do the whole thing. And so I guess I try to make it a kind of a shorter story. I knew it was going to be an emotional reunion for all of us because of everything we had gone through on that virtual tour and all the behind the scenes stuff and just goodness. But I didn't think it was going to be that emotional until I saw them. So I actually didn't meet them until after their set was done. And I met, if I remember right, I want to say it was Carl and Steve. So Carl's the keyboard and Steve's the drummer. They're over at the merch table, so they're manning the merch table. And if I remember, I met them first, and then they left, and Sasha came and was behind, had merch table duty. And so my friend, she was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm trying not to fangirl, but there's Sasha." And I'm like, "Well, you kind of know them because you're on their, on their live stream and all that kind of thing. Go over and say hi." And so they did. She and her husband went over and said hello to them, or to her, I should say. And then, so I waited till they're done, and then that's when I went over. And she couldn't leave the table, but that's why we're a big hug across the table. And then, you can kind of see in that picture that we were holding hands as we're like, and I still don't exactly remember what we were saying to each other. We were just kind of saying something, feeling the same thing about like we're finally together, and I got all that stuff that had happened over that tour, just kind of manifested itself into all this emotion of us just kind of looking at each other and talking. And I do remember her saying that when she gets a chance, she's going to give me the biggest proper hug ever when she can get away from that table. And so that connection just became so much stronger then when we were finally back together. And it's interesting to me from my point of view, because the person I've always felt I've known the best has actually been Tosh, the one who's done my written interviews, the one I've had communication with about the virtual tour and all that. It's always been through her, not through Sasha. Sasha and I got to know each other better as that tour went on because she was putting a lot of the programming together. So like she needed my music video from the artist to plug into the computer and everything else that they're doing. So she was becoming my run person. She and Scott, I became closer to them as that tour went on, and then Tosh was off doing all the other things. So yeah, that moment, my friend who had met her earlier, she just used her phone and was just like, I didn't even realize she was taking pictures of us as we were in this moment together. And I'm so glad she did, because now I have that. I mean, it's not the best picture, but still it captured a moment that I didn't think I was going to be able to ever look back on other than in my head. Eventually I know I saw Tosh and we hugged properly and we're talking for a while. And then I don't know if she tapped me on the shoulder or if she just said something, but I just heard something about, I don't want to interrupt. And it was Sasha, because she had come around this is later in the night. And that's when she gave me the big Sasha hug. And I finally got to see Gordon, and Scott had seen me in between because he was playing for 2 bands at that show besides Alice, who was helping out with System Sin. And so it was just like, yeah, I was so glad that we finally got this big reunion together in Seattle, and it just re-solidified how much I love that band and love those people. And that hasn't changed. And I think, as I mentioned, that I went to 2 other shows right after that on the tour here in Washington. I'm sure that had a big piece to do with this. Like, man, I want to see them again. I want to support them again. And let's go take a drive. And for anybody out there, again, if you're not familiar with the band or Mankind's Obsolete or Alice Underground or anything else that they have, I definitely check them out. They are completely DIY, everything that they do. And can't say enough good things about them. I'm sure some people are quite tired of me talking about them and mentioning them during my various live streams, from actors to dancers and people that really don't know anything about Alice. It's like, no, but they're artistic people, and this. They have dancers in their circle. They've got film people in their circle. I mean, Clint is a film person. They've got all this wonderful talents around them, and just like now I'm in that mix somehow, and I'm just so like blown away by that fact that it's like I can get on my phone and text Sasha and be like, I don't do that, but I could. That somehow I worked my way in there.
Yeah, and that's a really beautiful story, Mark. That's really, it just shows the power of connecting with like-minded people and putting yourself out there. Just the rewards that it reaps. Yeah, I didn't really speak to Sasha that much myself. All this has been through email with Sasha, but because she voiced a few characters in XRL7, and so I've only ever spoken to her via email. I've actually, to be honest, I've only spoken to Tash, Sash, and Scott. I haven't actually spoken to the other guys, unfortunately. I'd love to, so maybe I should reach out. But Sasha, I must say, just even from and Facebook Messenger with Sasha, just from text, I can mirror what you're saying. What a lovely, lovely, wonderful, giving person. You're so positive, so full of life. Really, anyone in Alice that I've spoken to has always been an absolute pleasure to interact with, and they make great music. So, as you say, they're a very special band, as you said last time.
Yeah, no, I hope you get a chance to talk to Sasha in some other format, because her, and especially if you get a chance to meet her in person, she's got such this big energy to her, and it's so positive and so warm and caring and fun, and she's just like that Energizer Bunny rabbit. She's just like, and that's how I think most people know her that have met her. But then there's also, I've had a chance, because of me being behind the scenes with doing everything we did on the virtual tour, and even like on this tour when they were here in person, she's a regular person like anybody else. And so we've had some more in-depth discussions where she doesn't have to maybe like be on, and I'm not saying she is, but that's how most people know her. But it's like, oh no, she's going to have deeper thoughts as well when she wants to. And so that's been really great too. And Tosh, as you probably already know, her energy is very different. She's more introverted. She's more, and she's super, super positive and caring and empathetic as well. And I think that's kind of something that runs the thread that runs through that entire band, every member in that band, that they're very caring people. They want to see the best for you. They're not egotistical in the way of like, well, what's in this for me? Or, you better do it this way. They want to collaborate with you. They don't want to just dictate to you, because that's what they left me, just to mark book whoever you want. I'm kind of like, really? I thought for sure, since this was their gig, their show, that they're going to say, well, can you at least stay with musicians or stay with stuff that's kind of like our fans would like? And they didn't tell me anything like that. Just like, whoever you want to bring on, you bring on. So I'm like, wow, awesome.
Yeah, it's a nice bit of trust there.
It is, and it wasn't lost on me that I was always mentally thinking about, well, who are some of the areas that I want to check off? If it's going to be female representation or LGBTQIA representation, or different, film and TV and everything that I kind of do, and kind of throwing it out there on that tour. But also, there's definitely going to be some bands that came across. I'm like, I think the Alice fans would probably dig this band, so I want to make sure I can try to get them into the schedule somewhere. And that's happened a lot. Actually, I told Steve, the drummer, this in person, that since that tour has been done, there's a lot of guests I've come across. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, man, they would be perfect for, if Alice ever has me on another virtual tour or something, I want you and you and you and you. I say, I think you're big Alice fans. And obviously you would be somebody perfect, because you're already connected to them. And some of the fans, Alex is in the chat, but some of the other fans who love Alice don't maybe know about you and how you're connected to them. So you would absolutely be somebody that would make so much sense to come on.
Yeah, that'd be so cool if, like, I don't know, because as you know, Tash has sung on 2 songs, Sasha on 1 with Tash on in my projects. I was speaking to someone recently, like in the show, the guy who plays, if anyone knows XRL7, who's, well, for anyone that may not know XRL7, the lead bad guy is a guy named the Duke, and I was speaking to his voice actor the other day, because he's quite keen to manifest a live performance in some way of XRL7, which would be quite an interesting thing, because it's, as you know, it's an animated show. There's loads of different featured artists that appear on different tracks. So it's an interesting thing. How would that go live? And we were talking about it, and I think if we did do that, there's I think the most practical solution is probably having a live band, and members that are available pop in, pop out. But if there's like an internet element to that, that'd be quite interesting, because you do see some bands and some artists somehow, I don't know how they do it, but they have someone collaborating and singing with them in a different part of the world on the live stream. I don't know how they sort the timings out for that, but that sounds like something very fascinating to look into. And who knows, maybe one day we'll get the Alice girls on a stream and, you know, performing with us. Who knows?
That would be awesome. And yeah, I mean, I'm thinking the same things. Like, how do they get to that point where they can have that work, you know, timing wise? And apparently the technology is there that they can get to that point of doing that. I'm picturing in my head, if you do a concert like that, of having the animation, because I saw some multimedia things here in person from a different band where they had like because they have a comic book and they have, I think there was an animated series at some point, and then they write the songs for the animated stuff that they do. So they incorporated all of it live into the show.
Nice.
So, yeah, so they had like an opening animated thing that was strictly for the tour, and then they'd go into a song, and then some of the stuff from that song that was in the animated series would start playing behind them on the screen behind the stage. And I'm like, God, this is so great that they're putting all those worlds together. And it's all coming together. And that would be awesome for what you do.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that'd be fun. It'd be interesting for people that don't know what XRL7 is. They'll be like, what's going on here? But I'm up for it. I'm very up for it.
That's really true. I think some of the people that were at that show that I was at, because there wasn't a lot of people there who didn't know the band, they're kind of like, so am I at the right thing? What is this?
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be at this like hard rock show thing. And then the band starts like, oh, okay, now I kind of get it. And if you go to the merch table and you see the comic books, like, oh, all right, now it's kind of making sense to me that they're a multimedia act and that kind of thing. So
yeah, it's cool. It gives it depth flow, I think, doing something like that.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious for myself, of the instruments and things that you play. What is your main instrument?
Oh, my main instrument is probably my go-to is guitar. And I'm not sure if I don't think I said this last time, but I write 99% of the songs from acoustic guitar. So you've got the voice, the chords, the core song, the structure, and basically, you know, that's kind of, once you've got it there and you've got the song locked in there, then you can transpose it to the other instruments, the digital world, and it will usually work and you can complement that. But guitar is my go-to. I can play a little bit of keyboards, but I rather program that. So my role in the series, usually if you hear a guitar, it's going to be me, except for one song. And the vocalists normally, well, for every song I present to them a guide vocal of the lyrics and the melodies and stuff, and they do their performance of it. But there's a couple of songs where the artist tweaked a couple of lyrics, trying to find a polite way of saying changed a couple of lyrics. But yeah, typically that's my role. Some of the songs I'll do all the synths, but recently, you know, looking at those amazing artists around me, there's quite a few songs where I've asked people in other bands who are much better at sound design than myself to contribute some synths and do some extra programming and things. So, you know, we have people like the Gen Cab, for example, did some great synths on a track called Overdose of Emotion. We got Pete Crane of Shiver appeared on a song. Latest single had Art versus Industry, who's fronted by Avi Ghosh. I'm not sure if you come across Avi, because he's quite familiar with Alice, and I know he did a remix for them. I was curious, have you encountered him in your paths?
I haven't, but I need to, it sounds like.
He's awesome, man. He's been making music since he was like 16 or something, back in 2000. And this is a surreal thing through Alice as well. A little side story. So Avi had this band called Defy, and it was on this site. I don't know if you ever came across this, mp3.com, back in 2000. And
I was on it.
Oh, dude.
My music. Yeah.
Oh, link me up. Yeah, there's some awesome bands on there. I remember Cell Dweller was on there, and the Shizits, you know, before they became Rabbit Junk. Lots of really awesome bands. And I remember Avi had his stuff there, and I loved it. This was back in the days where you had to dial up modem, and you had to wait like hours for this like 3 megabyte file to be downloaded. And it's like, oh, come on, dude. And I really loved his music. He has a bit of a Nine Inch Nails vibe to him. It was just unheard of at the time. This 16-year-old kid doing everything, vocals, instruments, mixing, it just everything. It was so good. So I've been a fan of his for a number of years, and he stopped doing music a few years later, I believe, because of his work and just life circumstances. And one day I noticed that he did a remix for Alice under Art versus Industry, his new project. And they mentioned Avi, and I saw his name pop up on some social media. I was like, hang on, is that Avi Ghosh, the guy that's from Defy? And so sure enough it was, and they interviewed him on Alice did a live stream about the remixes for Electric, I believe it was. And he was there, and I was like, that's the dude. So I decided to reach out and just say, hey man, been listening to your music for years and whatever, and now we've become a lot closer and sort of became friends from that. And now he's appeared on 2 tracks, and it's once again Alice connecting people. So there you go.
That's amazing. I love that story. And especially because it spans a lot of time too, of like when you liked him in Defy, and then he kind of disappeared for a bit, and he comes back through Alice by doing a remix, and it's like I love when things like that work out, and like now you have a friendship with them, and that it just goes back to, you just never know like who you're talking to, and then maybe who they're quote unquote connected to, and that you get put into their world. And some people always talk about like they don't like to look back, they always like to look forward. It's like I like to do both. I do like to kind of reflect on things, and it kind of reminds me of like where I was, what I did. And a lot of that stuff brings a smile to my face when I look back at old things that I did, and pictures and people I met and all that. And it also kind of reminds me like, look how far reaching this thing has gotten. It sounds like it's the exact same thing for yourself. That
absolutely. It's funny with the networking as well, because another story which I have told publicly on a backstage video is on actually another episode which Avi is on. There's a song called Overdose of Emotion, which Andy Sizek of the band Monument sings on. And if you know him, he's a beast. He's got the most insane screams, and he's wild. And he can sing high, I'll tell you that. But I'm like, how I hooked up with him was because a few episodes back, I'd hooked up with, there's a musician called Nikki Simmons, and she did a cover of the song Gatekeeper that we spoke about last time for episode 18. And she was doing a Twitch stream of recording the vocals for it. She was literally going through it take by take. It's fun when she did that. I wish she still did that. But I thought I'd represent, join the chat, and say hi. And I interacted with a few of the viewers and fans there and kind of got to know them a bit. And one of them was pretty tight with Andy. And when Andy made a tweet saying, I'd love to get into voice acting or something, this guy responded to the tweet and tagged me in and said, hey man, can you hook a brother up? And I was like, yeah man, just let me know. I love Andy's stuff. And Andy messaged me, and here we are, and he's in the track, and it sounds insane. And it's just just the network of people leading to other people and other opportunities.
Again, that's amazing. I love hearing stories like that. I think I remember there's a band that got connected to me because of Doyle, if I remember right, because they had met him in Europe when they were both playing shows together. And I didn't know who they were, but during the pandemic, it was like there they are, and I'm kind of like, so why do they keep showing up in my feeds and stuff like that? So it's because of the Doyle thing. It turns out they had watched that first video interview I did with him back in 2015, and so now we're connected because of that. And I had no idea that here I am in cold, wet Seattle in 2015 doing this interview on a tour bus with Doyle, that I would be connected to this other band who's like half a world away. I mean, they're in a whole other country, but here we are. And it's like,
that is awesome. That is
it
awesome.
It's the power of the internet for sure, social media, and just kind of getting things out there, because in the old days, because I'm so old, I don't know how people like arrange their interviews. Like if you're not connected to a big publication or something, I don't know what an independent person did, because I've been able to reach out directly to people, and then they'll tell me who their publicist is, or sometimes they'll just do it. Like in Alice's case, they're the ones in control of their stuff, so they'll just book what they want. So it's like we need Andy in our Discord. Rihanna say.
Yeah, that'd be nice. It's interesting, like, because like you're talking about, like when you try and track people down, it's an interesting avenue how to do that, because I've certainly had some interesting experiences trying to get in touch with people. I have learned that a lot of the time, at least in the creative endeavor of voice acting and appearing in the show, if someone has a manager, most of the time it doesn't work out. If I get straight to the artist, it's all good. And but managers, because typically managers, they want the money. So but I'd say the worst one, I mean, it sounds so small, but not worst, but when you message someone or you email someone, I would love if everyone would reply, even if it's a no. The worst is when you hear nothing, or initially when someone expresses interest and then they just stop replying. I've had that a few times, because it's like, what do you do? It's like, okay, well, how long do I give this person before I absolutely 100% move on? And the longer I wait, I'm wasting time, so it's like there's a certain line with that as well. But I think, you said last week, communication is key. I think even if you're speaking to someone and you don't want to do it, I mean, I approached one person who wasn't interested, who I'd love to work with, was Chris Corner of IMX. Would love to work with him. I messaged the management, and the management responded to me that just they're not going to take this opportunity at this time. And I was like, well, that's fair enough. Now I know to move on for this character. And I was actually quite happy with just having that closure, rather than just no response. So yeah, so respond to my emails, people.
I'll second that. Please respond to my emails or my messages.
Yeah.
I think so. For me, if I have to pick, it's actually worse for me when someone seems interested in whatever I'm trying to propose to them, and then they disappear. Because, if I just don't hear from you at all, then for the most part, I'm probably gonna do one follow-up, and then I'm gonna move on to the next thing. But if it seems like you're kind of engaged, oh yeah, tell me more, and I'll send out some dates when we can do a live stream, and then I don't hear anything, and then I gotta follow up after a few days, and I don't hear anything. So I'm like, so where are we with this? You're in limbo, and
How long do you give that follow-up? Do you give it like a week or a few days, or?
Quite honestly, it depends on how interested I am in whatever I'm trying to do with that guest. So I might wait 5 days. I might wait like a week from Monday to Monday. Sometimes it might be 3 days, because if it's kind of like, if I have a chunk of time that was really going to work for their schedule, then I need to kind of know now, because then I might be able to use that chunk for somebody else, especially like say for international guests, weekends. If I have a day off on my day job on a Monday or something, it's like, hey, this is rare. I don't get this very often. So if you want to do it, let's do it now. And I can get up as early as I need to, and you can do your thing. And so I hate it when I've wasted that opportunity because someone doesn't get back to me, and I could have went to somebody else that is also in another country and they want to do it. I guess it's really hard for people to say no sometimes.
That's
all I can think of.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little side story as well, if you will indulge me, Mark, where on there was a particular episode of this show, episode 18 of X-RL7, which is an episode which was it felt quite ambitious at the time, because it was kind of a loving poke at YouTube and music YouTube in particular, and part of that was covers. And so I managed to assemble 5 different artists who took on 5 X-RL7 songs and did their own rendition of it, kind of reimagined it in different styles. And oddly enough, the main thing I wanted to get, the one I was most excited about to get, was an acoustic version of an X-RL7 song, of one that was previously heavy, or and that was actually the hardest one to get. You'd think it would be easy because there's quite a lot of acoustic people on YouTube, but goodness me, so many people I would reach out to, and I would, if they responded to the message, the email, they'd get in touch. And there was like 2 people that were really positive and really nice about it, and like, oh yeah, I'd really love to be involved. And once they had the files to do what they needed to do with, they just disappeared and stopped responding. And it's one of those things, like, where you see them online posting and doing all this stuff, and you're like, what? What's going on? And yeah, it took me a while. In the end, I found the amazing Annie Wallflower, who did a great cover of a song called Kindred. She was so awesome, and she just did such a beautiful version. But I guess the positive, we're always looking for positives, is in doing that, trying to find the acoustic people, and after getting messed around so much, I did actually stumble across another artist who appeared in the show called Marlene Mendoza. And I was searching for maybe someone does an acoustic version of Spirit Box. I was looking for people that are already doing covers that I thought would be really cool. And I came across Marlene, and it wasn't an acoustic version. It was a screamy, badass, vocal cover. And I was like, oh my God. And I checked out the rest of her stuff, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. I really genuinely like this. Got in touch with her, and she did a heavier version of one of the songs, but it worked out in a way that I kept having to search for new people and expand what I was looking for. But goodness me, like it's good when it works out. Once it's all done, it's all good. But the disappearing people,
yeah, no, that process I can totally relate to. Yeah, in the end, you ended up finding some new people and some great, getting exposed to some great artists. But the people that disappeared on you, it's like, come on.
Come on, tell me why.
Yeah, and I've told this to many people that when I first started doing eclectic arts and was reaching out to people that, I just didn't hear anything. I mean, I don't know how many emails, I just didn't hear anything. And so when I got a no, that was a step up, because at least I heard something.
Yeah.
Said, okay,
Yeah.
it's not what I want to. Yeah, it's not what I want to hear, but at least I know. And then so that the next thing is eventually I'll get a yes. And then still to this day, which is perfectly fine, I get no's for show covers, particularly to get a photo pass to review concerts. But as long as I know, and one thing for me that it drives me nuts, and I don't care that I'm talking about this live right now, is with concerts, a lot of times they don't approve you till sometimes the day of the show. So you don't know, are you on the guest list for a ticket and a photo pass? And in my way of thinking, it's like, there's no reason why management can't know at least 24 hours in advance who's approved and who's not. But they're so used to not doing it that way. And don't get me wrong, some bands will let you know maybe 3-5 days in advance. Hey, you're approved, you're good to go, here's your contact. But other ones, yeah, you're just sitting around twiddling your thumbs, like, well, I don't know. It's just like, it's so disrespectful of people's time.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about from small to big. It's not a certain type or level of success of a band. I know, like for Guns N' Roses, I got approved like at 2:00 that afternoon of the show. So then it becomes, how bad do I want this? Do I really want to go down to Seattle and do this and try to grab something? Because they actually gave me 2 tickets. And in that case, I did, because it was I was after it for so long, trying to get this thing. When I got approved, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go do it. But as I kind of started to value myself more and more as the years went on, I'm kind of like, I have to tell people now, it's a 24-hour notice. So if I don't hear from you within 24 hours of the gig, and I don't care if it's something I really, really want to cover and I can't wait, it's a sold out show, I want to be there, I'm going to politely say, no, I can't do this. I can't just drop everything and come, drive to Seattle and take care of this thing.
Yeah.
And most of the publicists have been very, very understanding of that, because I know it's not them, it's the management of that said artist. That's the one that has to give the yay or nay on this stuff. And that's not going to change the system. I know I'm a drop in the bucket, but I'm like, I'm going to hold firm to this. I'm like 24 hours or more, then that's great. But if you let me know that morning, that afternoon, forget it. I won't be there.
Yeah. I think that's something as well, that as you get better at doing something as well, one important thing is actually the ability to say no, because it's so easy just to, like, I mean, when I started my musical journey, I was featuring on people's tracks, doing all sorts of stuff. And, I was just, you're keen just to get the opportunity and do it. And I think once you get a little bit more established and you have your personal life and all this stuff, it's, I've been asked to do quite a few things, like, even since X-RL7, I've been asked to feature on songs, or quite a few people have asked me to animate music videos for them. And whilst it would be a lovely opportunity potentially, you kind of have to stick to your guns and say, well, hang on, if I do that, it's going to delay my project that I care about most of all, or it's going to, influence me in a bad way, some way, what I mean, some way, or put me out in some way. And you have to sort of value your time and value yourself and say, no, you know what, I need to just do what I think is important and stick to that. So I think saying no is actually, it's for introverted people like us, I think it can be a bit challenging sometimes. So it's good to stick your guns and get a bit more assertive like that sometimes.
I totally agree, and you're right. I think it is something hard for introverted folks to say no, or I know in some cases people that don't like confrontation, so they're just going to go with the flow. It's like, no, I've gotten to a point of like, there's so many good people that don't do that kind of thing to me. So I'm like, I mentioned this last week. I'm going to keep working with those people and those publicists and those managers and those artists. And then if you're over here and then you kind of do that to me, I'm just going to hold firm. It's like, no, I don't work like that anymore. When I was first starting, I was like, hey, I'm just happy anybody wants me anywhere. So if you invite me, the show is in an hour. Okay, I'll try to get down there. And then after I was like, no, I'm valuing what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to accomplish. And even if that means like, I'm just going to be a vegetable and watching TV that night, that's still something that I value over you just trying to get me to come down there because you can't seem to get your shit together within 24 hours.
Oh, nice. We can swear on this cast. Great.
Yeah. Rihanna said, you're seeing your first concert in nearly 5 years, so you're really looking forward to it at the end of March. Okay, wow. Okay, so
awesome.
That's a long wait, but yeah, that's going to be awesome for you when you get a chance to be out there. And Mike, I know it's been over an hour, so I'm guessing we probably need to kind of wrap this up. You mentioned pre-show.
I think I've got 5. I think I'm good for 5.
5, okay.
But there is something about seeing something like, because especially after the last 2 years, you kind of forget how visceral and how moving live music is when you're in the room. The emotion of other people as well, just that energy is something which you're never going to capture just purely on a screen on a YouTube video. It's a very specific thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. I know many times during the virtual tour and on my own live streams, I was telling people that first show back for me, covering a show, is going to be very, very emotional. Just being back in that space. And the first show that I covered as for a concert, photographing stuff, that was in December of 2021. And just being back there, and it just feels very surreal. And just like you said, all the emotion and energy coming from your fellow fans there in the audience, and it's coming from the stage. And it was just like, it's so good to be back in that environment. But at that time, it was also, we weren't out of the woods yet. So no one was still masked up, and they're checking, vax cards and all that kind of thing at the venue. But I was just, man, I needed this back. And then now when you got the crazy, Cannibal Corpse fans going crazy behind you in the photo pit, there's nothing like, like you said, there's nothing like that visceral experience of just loud thumping music coming from the PA. The fans are going nuts, and everyone's just kind of communal in that sense because you're there because you love the band, hopefully.
Singing along out of tune as loud as you can.
Yeah, it feels so good to you, and you meet new people there, and just all that world. So it's like, I remember. I don't know if she's probably not watching right now, but one of the people that was watching a lot of my live streams during the pandemic had asked me once about, am I going to leave them when in-person stuff comes back? So was I going to leave this world? And I was like, no, I don't plan on doing this. I won't be able to do as much. I won't be able to do as many live streams, but I'm not just going to go like, see ya, and go back. And that was somebody who's very introverted and kind of is at home a lot on their computer and that kind of thing. And I get it. But I was like, no, I'm not going to disappear on you. And if for some reason I do, I'll probably make some announcement somewhere. It's like, hey, life change happened and I'm no longer doing whatever. Eclectic Arts is taking a long hiatus or something. But I wouldn't just disappear. And like we were saying earlier, it's nice having so many different opportunities to connect with people, not just in person, but virtually around the world. And yeah, with those shows, I don't have, I was just at a show last Sunday, Fits in the Tantrums, covering that. It sold out. So there had 1,100 people there at that show, and I'm in the photo pit, and there's some other photographers that I haven't seen in a while. And it's just, as soon as the band comes on, I love it when, the lights go down and that roar happens, and then the band goes on stage, and then I'm in the pit. So you're sandwiched between the fans behind you and the band in front of you. That never gets lost to me because I'm a fan, just like every photographer I've ever met in a photo pit. We're all fans. So
yeah.
It kind of gets good to you. It's like, and sometimes I find myself like kind of like bobbing to the music, and I'm supposed to be taking photos of the band. like
awesome.
Mark, Yeah, Mark, you have a job to do. You have a job to do. Oh, that's right. First 3 songs, then get out. You can bob all you want once you're done with your first 3 songs. But yeah, it's so I was talking about you need to see people. That's true. Some bands you don't know if you're going to get a chance to see them again. So, and hopefully we learned that during the pandemic that things can disappear tomorrow. So, the band comes to town. It's like, well, I'll just catch them next tour. There may not be a next tour, so see them now.
When I was in my band before Mixie One, it was called. It had a lovely name, Broken Butterfly X. It was we were kind of like it was this kind of metal band, alternative metal in the vein of Korn or Deer and Grey. We're influenced by a lot of Japanese metal and rock. And I remember just an anecdote from that. We played quite a few shows. I remember there was this one show we had in London, and it was really cool. We had lots of our friends there. It was we were headlining that show somehow, which just meant you were playing last, so a lot of people had left. But but there was still quite a lot of people there, and we were rocking. But I remember that night, there was something about it where I felt like when my performance, I felt like something was just off. I don't know what it was. I felt something was weird, right? So then, for whatever reason, I emotionally checked out of the show. So I got on stage and I recorded it. I played and I was rocking on guitar, but I was kind of like in a different headspace. I wasn't really in the moment. And I was like, I'll be better next gig. And still, I still did my thing. But I remember after the show, the drummer left the band. And suddenly it was like, oh, maybe we won't get to do this again, and it suddenly dawned upon me like, oh man, I should have really respected that moment. Unfortunately, we did eventually get another drummer and played a few more shows. But ever since then, I just kind of really tried to be in tune with the moment and realize that this is a very special circumstance that will never be repeated with the people here. This is something you really need to savor and enjoy. Because as you say, you don't know when things could go away, even when you're in the band. So definitely, if you see someone live, cherish that experience and get out there and do it.
Yeah, no, very well said. I know. I was playing music in a deal. We were just playing cover songs like coffee shops and stuff.
What's your instrument, by the way?
Guitar. That's why I asked that question earlier of you. I was kind of curious what your main instrument is. And I played guitar for many years. I suck now because I don't really play it. But my singer and I at the time, I always tell him, we're just doing this for fun. We're doing this for some tips and some beer and whatever, and just having a good time playing these songs and bringing a smile to people's faces. Because she would get very high strung about it. It's like, if we're like a professional band or trying to become a professional band doing original tunes, it's very different. The mentality is different to me, but this is just for fun.
Yeah.
Just getting out there and doing even just that level of show, it's like, it's never lost on me. It's like, don't ever take it for granted. That someone even wants you in their shop to begin with to play music, especially when they have you back. So that means you didn't suck completely. So they're like, yeah, we'd like to have you back. And yeah, it could be from a life standpoint that something happens and you're no longer doing that, or from a fan standpoint that something happens to the band or your favorite artist and they're no longer touring or they're just no longer here with us. Hopefully that's not the case, but you just never know. Mm-hmm. And so, at least for me, from the pandemic time, even though I knew that, it really got reinforced of like, man, when I get a chance to go see shows or go see an opera or go see whatever I've been so privileged to be able to do, I'm going to really, really just be in the moment and very present with those experiences, because I want them to just stay and stick with me like a freaking tattoo.
Soak it in.
Yep, totally. And I try not to forget that was the feeling, because it's so easy to kind of go back to 2019. It's so easy to kind of go back to what it was. And like, no. Remember, there was a big chunk of time when you didn't have a chance to see a movie. You didn't get a chance to see a live show. You can even go to some of your favorite bars here in the U.S. because they only had to-go stuff. You couldn't even hang out with your friends. So it was like bizarre. And so now that we're coming out of it and all that kind of thing, it's like, don't forget what you said you were going to do, the changes you were going to make in terms of how you approach life, basically.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes something which, maybe not in this case so much, but sometimes when things happen in your life which may seem like negatives, that actually can produce an even bigger positive, which is actually how X-RL7 started, because there were some things going on in my other projects in my life which I was getting very frustrated about, and in the end I just started XR7 and it's the best thing I did. So, these things happen,
They do. And as I've mentioned, I mean, doing live stream interviews, I've gotten connected with so many wonderful people from around the world. And it was the furthest thing from my mind. Had Alice not asked me about this, I don't think I ever would have started doing live streams because I'm not tech oriented. And it was just like, I was just going to wait it out, wait the pandemic out, and then I'll go back to what I normally do. But I told many people, I never in a million years would have thought that my media outlet was going to grow during a pandemic when everybody else either shrunk or went away. So I'm like, that's crazy. So there's that silver lining. There's that positive that came from initially a negative.
We like that.
Yeah. Well, hey, Mike, I know it's been wonderful talking with you first and foremost. And the fans that are in the chat, I really appreciate you checking things out. It's been one of the better interviews I've ever had a chance to do because you have so many things going on. I definitely feel like we relate to a lot of the same trials and tribulations, but also the positive things that have happened too artistically and just and that we have Alice to thank.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Yeah, I really enjoy speaking to you as well. Time flies when we're speaking. I don't know what it is. And I think that it's an enjoyable experience, definitely. And I hope we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, I would love to. Anytime you have something that you want to promote, if you want to come on and say, hey, Mark, I've got this new thing coming up, or there's a new episode, or just in general, something I haven't talked about. And this is when I was a freaking dinosaur. Maybe I did talk about it, that I worked at the end of the .com era in 2000, when you were talking about mp3.com and that kind of thing. I was the audio engineer for this computer company and they did a lot of cartoons for the web. So your work, that's one of the things that I was really interested in it because at that time, 23 years ago, I was used to seeing, because we had Garbage Island and we had a couple other ones that we're doing stuff with. So I was just doing the sound for it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that's a bit of my ancient background, but that's also why I had such a fascination with animation and other things, because I had a chance to do some of that stuff in the early days of the internet and putting stuff on the web series online and all that kind of thing. So it's great to see what you've done with yours, and I wish you every success with it. So and again, you know how to get a hold of me. I'm sure we'll be kind of following each other on social media and that kind of thing. And just let me know. And if I see something that you post about, I'm like, hey, I'd love to talk to you about that. If you want to come on again, then we'll reconvene in this format. So
absolutely.
Awesome.
And if I could plug something as well, just announced today, 10th of February is the new XR7 episode and EP called Cyanide Songs. So we've got 3 new songs and a remix of a song from the first album called Out of Control. And I'm looking forward to that getting out into the world. So 10th of Feb, pre-save.
10th of February. Awesome. That's really soon. Gosh, that's so crazy that we're almost in February.
I know, time flies, doesn't it, man?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but well, that's awesome. So 10th of February, everybody. And again, thank you so much, Mike, and thank everybody in the chat. And I'll see you next time.
Much love.
All right. Thank you.